different states until I was in 6th grade. She said, the way that I put order in my world was to find out as much as I can about where I am. And then that makes me feel like I'm at home. So that's basically what I did here with St. David's. I kept collecting all these little bits and pieces and storing them away, making this my home. So it's a pleasure to be here with you. Nancy says that I cannot speak longer, that I am timed. So I've now got the timer set. And when it tells me, then I'll quit. And I hope I get it all done. You're going to experience 5 minutes of 700 years of history. I'm going to bring it down that fast to bring us to this building and this place and the things that we have and why we have them. In the Middle Ages, cathedrals had treasury rooms, and they were basically what our sacristy is, but much bigger. And they kept the vestments, they kept the silver, they kept the Sunday offering, they kept the widow's offerings. They were basically a safe because there weren't banks to put them in. And so if you go to the cathedrals in England or in Rome, Italy, and as Dave Byers and I did in the past, we toured those rooms and saw things in them. And one of the things that we saw, and one of the things that really affects us directly, took place at Salisbury Cathedral in Salisbury, England. There are 2 things there that are remarkable. They've got in the yard a walking Madonna, which I've never seen before. It's a statue in stone of the Madonna walking somewhere in the city, and it's just incredibly exquisite. The second thing they have there, and this really does have a direct effect on you, is they have one of the 3 existing original copies of the Magna Carta. And for those of you who don't even know offhand or remember what Magna Carta is, Magna Carta means the great charge. And in 1215, the noblemen were a little bit irritated with King John because he kept taxing them and taking money from them and from their farmers and fighting wars with France, which weren't going well. He lost all the land in France at that time, and he figured the more money he captured, the more possibility, or the greater possibility, that he would be able to get his land in France back, which didn't turn out very well. So 1215, the noblemen, the barons, got together at a place called Runnymede. It's a meadow near the Thames River, and all the noblemen had all their knights in shining armor with their big swords, and there was the king. And one of the differences between then and now is the soldiers pledged their allegiance to the noblemen, not to the king. So the king was in a bad place because he's got this whole armed army in front of him with certain demands, which are now printed in the Magna Carta. And one was that he couldn't tax without asking the people first. He could not do anything he wanted. The king thought he could do everything and that he was above the law. Well, the Magna Carta says the king's not above the law, and the list goes on. And that's in the treasury. So we don't have that kind of treasury nowadays. We have a working sacristy because our money goes to the bank and we don't really have the kind of gold and silver that they had. That will come into play later when I talk about it. So our treasures are different, and they're scattered all over this building. And we're going to start today by looking at them. We're going to start with the windows. The windows were built by Omniglass on Marsh Road in Okemos. Well, I should back up just a minute more. When this complex was built. In 1962, they built the rectory. In 1963 and 64, they built this building. And at that time, the building ended at the back of the choir. The big double doors were in a classroom. As a matter of fact, it was called the double classroom because it had a divider that moved back in it. And the narthex was from the door on the left there that goes to the choir vesting straight across to the door to the right. And so as you can see, the building had a hallway from one end to the other. And people used doors on both sides. There was a flat roof over the classrooms in what is now the choir and the music, or the microphone room, whatever y'all call it, and over the doors. And 1, 2, 3 chandelier lights weren't there because that was another floor. So they had neon lights up there. And the organ was up there. There was a staircase in the corner behind the current organ. And the big surprise was that there is a floor-to-ceiling window up there, clear glass window. It's boarded up, but right behind that grill cloth screen, if you go to the back wall, there's a floor-to-ceiling window up there. And if you go way back in the parking lot and look at the building, you can see the window. So imagine this room at that time having a glass wall this side of the doors. That's why the light switches are where they are, because you walked in the building, walked into this room that way, and you turned the lights on. And so there was a glass window and a small narthex, and then 3 classrooms. The mail room was 1 classroom, and there were 2 classrooms there, and then you get to the Great Hall. But imagine clear glass there, and all these windows were clear glass, and so this was a very bright room. And so they began changing things, and the first change they made was with the windows. The windows on the north side of the room are blue and green because those colors do not need sunlight to look beautiful. And so that's why there's the predominance of blue and green. And you see very limited use of yellow, and you don't see any red in it. Very different from the windows on this side. The windows tell a story. They tell the story of the people of God who gather and question and come in the building. So if you look in the door, there's 2 people looking in, coming into the building. And if you look above the door on the transom, there's people looking in, wondering what's going on in St. David's. So they come in and they begin a journey, and they go through the woods. And if you look in the second window, there's a couple people. In the third window, there's a couple people, and so it continues. But also note the level of the people. They're low in the door, a little bit higher in the window, higher in the third window, and then they come down to the fourth window. They're going over the mountain of God into paradise. And they go through the woods and through the wilderness. And that's what all the trees are at the top, the green. When you get over, right behind the flag, you will notice there's a cross in the window, and there's a cross in the second window, a series of crosses, I should say. That means they have reached paradise. And all of this I got from the man who built the windows. Very different on this side. This side gets sunlight, and so it can have the dark colors, it can have the reds in it, it can have that. But you will notice again the same people who are looking to what's going on and becoming members of St. David's are still in those windows, but they're all pretty much lower in it. And when I came, and I thought the same thing that many of you thought, oh, how intriguing. Lansing is an industrial town based on the automobile, and look, we've got the factories. We've got wink and blink and a nod, talking about the importance of industry. And when I told that to the window designer, he was absolutely horrified. He said, you missed the what I'm trying to say in that window altogether. And I said, all right, enlighten me. What are you trying to say? He said, never look at the dark glass. Only look at the light glass. Those windows, all three of them, because we have a Trinity, all three windows speak of the coming down of the Holy Spirit upon the people. And so the true reason of those windows is if you follow the light, it comes down on the people. And so those all three represent the Holy Spirit coming and filling the people. Currently, I look at the windows and think they are the saints of the past who helped to build this place on both sides, and they're watching over us as we continue to worship and pray and do all the things that are so good that we do here. Told you I was going to be fast. The second thing I want to talk about is the stone wall behind me. That stone wall is solid. It's probably the most solid thing we have in this whole building. And they built the stone wall first and then built the building to it because it was going to be such an anchor point in our building. And so it's called a temple wall because it reminds us of the great temple in Jerusalem, and also the fact that it's a foundation upon which we worship in this space. If you look on the left side, right at the end of the cross arm, you will see 3 stones lined up, then 2 stones, and then the cross. That is the Trinity equals 1. So 1 and 3, 3 and 1. That's been in front of you all these years, and you've probably never seen it, but it's there. That's why the builder built it that way. And I will tell you one of 2 great stories about the art of this building. When I first came, my office was in the sacristy. And it was designed that way. Joe here is an answer for you. That light switch in the garage that doesn't turn anything on, It used to turn the lamp in the sacristy, the porch light on, so you could walk to your office in the dark and not have to use a light. So somewhere there's a buried cord through the garden that goes to your garage that doesn't do anything anymore. But, so my office was in there. It's that first summer, it got to be really, really hot in there because in the afternoon, the sun fills that room with light. And at that time, the big window was clear glass and there were no curtains on it. And in the wintertime, it would get cold. In the summertime, it would get hot. So I moved my office, I took office space away from Edie and all the previous secretaries. I moved into the current vestry room. Remember, the current mail room was all the office space that they had. Everything you see in the office, the filing cabinets, the Xerox machine, all that crap was in the mail room, and I had my office right there. So I was sitting in there one afternoon. The front door was unlocked because at that time we left the front door unlocked 24/7. And I was just working away, and I heard the front door open. And so I leaned back on my desk chair and looked, and a young woman and a man in a walker went past, and the doors were open. And so I came out my door just as they came in the front door, and I said, "May I help you?" And the young lady said, "This is my grandfather, and I brought him here. He was the man who built the stone wall behind you." And so I welcomed him and told him he could come up here. And he said no, he just wanted to sit and look, that he had never seen the building finished or in use since that wall was built in 1963. So he came on down the aisle and sat in the corner of the front pew for about 15 minutes, just sat quietly, and I went back in my office, and they got up and they left, and that was it. He briefly told me about the building, told me about the 3-in-1, and he said at the time that was the greatest amount of stonework and the most beautiful project that he had ever done, and it was one that brought him great joy. And so they went on, and that was nice. I wish I had gotten his name. I unfortunately did not think to get it, and I thought, you know, we might see him again, might not. His granddaughter came about 3 weeks later and told me that he died. And she just wanted me to know. And she said, all of his life he wanted to see that wall. That was something that was on his bucket list. And she said she was so glad that the building was open and I was here and he could come see what it looked like in use. And I told him that it was lovely and we were very thankful for it. This building, the whole complex, was designed after a church building in upstate New York. And in upstate New York, there was a big window there. So imagine, if you will, Sunday morning when it's 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, and the priest is standing in front of a whole lot of clear glass or stained glass. People weren't going to be able to see him or her. So when they built our building, the architect said, maybe you should not put any windows on the east wall of the church. Let me give you something that is a real focal point. So he did. And the rest of the building was to be clad in 4x8 sheets of, I don't know what it's called, Mike, do you know? Some kind of exterior sheathing, which means we would have to paint it about every 4 years. And if you think of how long this building has stood, 4 years of paint would have been a lot of money. But the architect said, be smart, use brick, and you won't ever have to paint it. And so that is why we have the brick building that we do today, and that we don't have windows in the front of the building, so that you're not blinded when you look at me. Now, of course, the priest would have been blinded in the afternoon with the light coming in from the back, but oh wait, that's his problem, not yours. This church was the first church in the diocese that was built with a freestanding altar. All the rest of the altars were built against the wall. When it was built, people did not use freestanding altars. And so for the first, 10 years, Dave, the priest celebrated on this side of the altar facing the wall, which is why so many of the old vestments have all the beautiful decorations on the back, because the people could look at him while the priest was facing the wall. It wasn't until the late 60s, sometime in the early 70s, that Bruce Irwin decided to be really avant-garde and move around and face the people. And I can't imagine what the conversation was like. I am sure that people got real excited about that for a whole lot of reasons. But, and was told by Dick Hammond, who was the lay reader, actually, Dave, maybe you can do this. In the beginning, even the lay readers didn't come behind the altar rail. The lectern was sitting right there on the corner, and they read the lessons from there. This lectern was never used, just the pulpit. So during the time of the changes of how we did service, people came up and faced the people. On